Hey, how's it going? It's week 10 of the NFL season, and we are live on Pro Football Ireland's, I think, YouTube channel, on X, on Facebook, and also for everybody listening on our podcast network, we are live as well. Michael McQuaid, delighted to be joined by Jason Hayes as we get set to go into double digits for this NFL season already. Jason, it's good to see you, man, and while I share this live link on social media, tell us, how are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, it's been a eventful week. I've been glued to American coverage for different reasons for the last few days, so that's been interesting.
42 seconds that took. 42 seconds.
Yeah, it's I know it's just everywhere: radio, TV, Twitter. It's kind of all that's being discussed at the moment. So looking forward to chatting about some football for a change now.
It's good to see you again, man. And basically, Hogan's not here because he is in New Orleans. And just on that, very quickly, we're in New Orleans this weekend on the invite from the New Orleans Super Bowl committee ahead of Super Bowl 50. Is it 57 or 58? Is it 58? I feel like it's 58, Jason.
It's 59, I think.
Oh,
I think it's
Jesus.
IX, LIX.
I don't even
Oh
know.
God, I
It's
don't.
one of the Super Bowls, but we've been invited over, and we're really, honestly, we're pretty humbled at the fact that we are given the opportunity to do so, and we really appreciate it. Mark is over there all weekend checking out, so you can check out New Orleans. I believe he's talking to Charlie Smith today, and then on that as well. It's not just happening in New Orleans this weekend, and Jason, I haven't been talking to you about this, so I'll tell everybody so they're aware about this as well. Over the next 2 to 3 days, we have got a situation where Andy Quinn, a friend of this podcast, is committing to a university in America tomorrow evening at around 6 or 7 o'clock our time, during the NFL Academy game, which is taking place in Munich. Um, and then we should have a one-on-one with Jude McAtamney in Munich on Saturday. So it's all happening alongside this podcast as well. And the NFL comes to Munich this weekend. I'll be in Munich, and I believe, Jason, you're currently setting up the PFI bar in Cork. Is this why you're not going to Munich, or what's the crack?
Oh God, yeah. Look, I'd like to be there because I was in Frankfurt last year, and can't say I'd like to be there for the match, but I'd like to be there because of the crack I've heard that can be had in Munich in the beer halls. Sounds like a next level up. So I think kind of should be a quite friendly atmosphere with the both teams having virtually nothing to play for. So I can see fans being in good moods and just going to have the crack essentially, which is what it's all about. So I'm sure you'll have fun in many ways if it's not during the game.
If you are watching live, apologies, do feel free to send us a question. As if you can hear FaceTime in my ear, Jeff Reinbold's FaceTiming me right now. I'm going to hit decline. I don't know why that happened live there now. Um, yeah, basically it's week 10. Just what I texted him back, Jason, can you tell me, do you feel like the season's flying in, like scarily flying in, or are you happy with how it's going so far? Because I feel like it started 5 seconds ago, man.
I mean, yeah, week 10 double digits now. We're officially over the halfway mark. As soon as the first football is kicked this Sunday, it's kind of bizarre. It's just like you think of it in different ways. When you kind of think back to what we were talking about and what was happening in week 1, week 2, it kind of feels like a lifetime ago. It's kind of the nature of these podcasts, I suppose. But then when you come up for breath, it almost feels like we've just blinked and we're 10 weeks into the season. But that's the fun of it. That's why the NFL is so special, because we look forward to it year round, and you better make the most of it when it's here, because another one of those, another, and we'll be in January and we'll be in the playoffs, and there won't be many games left. So enjoy it when we can.
Let's talk about our first topic of the night. And before we get into that, we're presented by 888 Sport, the official betting partner of the NFL in Ireland and the UK. We might bring Jeff in on this, so I'm going to start you off with this, Jason, if you don't mind, and I will come back to it in a wee second. I took the reins this week of picking the topics, and I know it's probably talked about really a lot in the media, but I feel like it's important for us to talk about it as well. The Cowboys have really struggled, Jason, through the last few weeks, and they're really poor to watch. Never mind for a start. We've seen what's happening with Dak Prescott. He is not doing well. We don't know when he's going to play again. As a fan that sits and watches the games, and you've obviously had the chance post London for the last 2 to 3 weeks at 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, Where exactly do you think they go from here? And do you think the season's up, or do you think there's any hope for them at all going forward?
The season's up, yeah. The season's up. Dak is gone to IR. I'm not sure that was made official, but he's all but guaranteed to be heading out for an extended period of time. They're already in a hole with 3-5, and there's a lot of quality teams in the NFC ahead of them. So they haven't shown any indication that they can turn this around. And certainly with that injury at quarterback, I don't see things changing despite a blockbuster trade, fourth round pick for Jonathan Mingo. I don't think many people expected the Cowboys to be
What
buyers.
did you think of that? Like, that was shocking. Like, because they promised, like, Jerry Jones promised like a big thing, a guy he was looking forward to since college, and then they get Jonathan Mingo. I mean,
That's just Jerry Jones there, It's he has guys that he likes. He clearly liked him coming out of college, and he's just completely closed his eyes on the last 18 months of what he's actually done. Young fella. I don't want to trash talk Jonathan Mingo by any means, because he could go on to have a great career, but certainly seems like an overpay on paper. The fact that the Panthers will be delighted with a move like that, I think says it all. Fourth round pick. He has 12 catches on the year, 120 yards. When you look at some of the other moves being made around the league and what a fourth round pick can actually get you, whether it be a quality pass rusher, DeAndre Hopkins, not much more could get you a Devontae Adams. So it's an overpay, and the situation, the move doesn't make sense, and I don't know why he's done it. Especially while he already had the context of knowing that Dak is injured and he will be missing time. If that's not a time to throw in the towel on the season, he clearly has no intention to.
it never is. I'm going to bring in Jeff Reinbold here for the crack. Why? Because Jeff is just available, and we don't have Mark Hogan. Can you? This is the problem with this. Can you hear us for a start?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Oh, there we go. Jeff, Jason's talking there about the struggles, and I know you don't want to talk about the Cowboys, but it's our topic on this show. So first off, you're very, very welcome, and it's great to have you on here as a replacement for Mark Hogan tonight. We haven't really talked too much about the Cowboys, and Jason was talking about the fact they've brought in a guy like Mingo, and I was actually going to bring it up, and feel free to talk about it. How much they've struggled on the run game this year, because to rely on a guy like Zeke Elliott after letting Tony Pollard go is one thing. And I don't feel like this is regurgitation of what the national media is saying here, Jeff, but this is a team that many expected to, make a run in the offseason. They haven't. And now Jason said it, and I'll say it. It feels like the season is up for them. Is there any way back right now, do you think?
Well, again, as long as you're not eliminated mathematically, there's always a chance, right? And but the reality of it is with the Cowboys were returning a really good football team, and then little by little they've let that kind of start to slip away. You mentioned the fact that they let Pollard go. They bring in Ezekiel Elliott when they could have signed any number of backs, including the one that's leading the league in yardage right now in Derrick Henry, who lives in Dallas in the offseason and was right there for him. And, again, Jerry made the statement that they were all in. Well, I think when you look at teams like Kansas City, you see an organization that truly is all in. They continue to try and build that team, San Francisco being another one. Even though they've been decimated with injuries like the Cowboys have, they've found a way to continue to build their team and to win in a bad situation. I don't think it's time to throw in the towel on the season, but certainly Dak being on the side, with that hamstring injury for what could be a prolonged period of time. The thing over here right now that everybody's asking about the Cowboys is, well, you traded for a quarterback to San Francisco for a fourth round pick, and he hasn't played a down yet. And now you're going to put Cooper Rush on the field, who we already know isn't good enough. He's going to be a career backup. What does that say about the organization and what direction you're going? And certainly if you're a Cowboy fan, this has to be extremely frustrating.
Jason, I'll come to you before we go back to Jeff here. Jeff mentioned in his podcast earlier on, which you can actually listen to now, about Daboll's situation, which we will talk about. Actually, I think it's the next topic, this game in Munich. Do you see a situation where McCarthy doesn't last to the end of November, Jason, or do you think that's crazy talk? But we've seen guys go. We've seen Allen go last week.
I mean, Jerry Jones seems to have a strong personal relationship and connection to Mike McCarthy at least, so he might do him the decency of letting him see out the season. I do think it's a very difficult path for the Cowboys from here because the schedule doesn't lighten up by any means. They're 3-5 now. They still have to play the Eagles twice, the Commanders twice, Texans and Bengals as well. So that's 6 tough games right there, and the next 3 will be critical. Philadelphia, Houston, and Washington. So the season, if it's not over now, it could well be over before December. And maybe it's just a case of they have someone on the staff that they want to see what they've got, and it might be worth trying them out at head coach, or maybe there's just no value in making a change at that point in the season. What I will say, there likely will be change coming if things don't dramatically turn around, because Mike McCarthy's kept his job for a few years now, based on regular season performances, and obviously hasn't carried that into the postseason. That's the one thing he's been able to hang his head on. So if the regular season performance does dip, then he's definitely in trouble, and I think the writing's on the wall.
Jeff, do you think it's time, or do you think if you gave it a couple of weeks and it still hasn't improved, do you think it's time to sit back for the season?
Well, again, that's going to be a doctor's decision primarily first. And what is the long term? He's the face of the franchise. You just paid him a ton of money. They're not going to put him out there prematurely if the season continues to spiral the way it's going. I'm sure that, they're going to have Dak's best interest at heart, because of the fact that they have paid him so much money, and they're going to need to get back on that investment. Let me just say this about Mike McCarthy and coaching in Dallas. Dallas may be one of the hardest jobs in the National Football League because of the structure and because of ownership and all that. It's a high profile job, and it comes with a lot of there are a lot of nice things about it, right? Dallas is a great place to live. It's a great Texas, great football state. But look at the long term. Since Jimmy Johnson was let go, you look at the number of coaches that have been through that organization, and you can go Switzer and Bill Parcells, and you can talk about Wade Phillips, and you can talk about Jason Garrett. There have been some great football coaches had that job, and nobody has been able to win the quote the ultimate prize, what everybody's competing for, and what the Cowboys say they're all in for. So that tells me it's not a coaching problem. The problem is deeper into the organization.
Jeff, naturally, Dak Prescott is he gets the headlines, and the offense gets the headlines when you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys. But the defensive performance has dipped quite drastically, and something that's probably not getting talked enough is how much the Cowboys might be missing Dan Quinn right now, who of course is doing fantastic stuff for the Commanders. How would you think his move away has hurt the Cowboys this year?
Well, it certainly hurt the Cowboys because, number one, he took some players with him that were, with the Cowboys last year. And he took, you talk about Dan Quinn. It was not only Dan Quinn, it was, Aiden Durden, who's now the defensive coordinator in Seattle, was his defensive line coach. Their defensive line has really underperformed. Part of that's because Parsons, hasn't been healthy. And, Dan Quinn hasn't made a tackle in Washington. Dan Quinn hasn't sacked a person in Washington, right? The players make plays. And when you look at the Cowboys, they've been hurt up front, which has hurt a secondary that when Parsons was healthy, when Lawrence was healthy, they could get after the passer. So the secondary now is exposed a little bit. They've always been a gambling bunch back there, Deron Bland and all those guys. And, they would make plays on balls, but they would also give up some plays. But because they were good enough up front, they could get away with it. Now you take away a running game, right? You take away a pass rush. Now you take away a quarterback, and there isn't really much left when you look at the Dallas Cowboys.
Jeff, I'm not sure if you, Jason, or anyone listening to the podcast after we're live here has heard the comments in an article this week from Troy Aikman, obviously known very well down in Dallas for very obvious reasons, and they haven't really done much since, starting to sound like a politician talking like that. But he said the following: they have no run game to speak of, an inordinate amount of pressure on the passing game, and Dak Prescott and each receivers. They've had a hard time stopping the run. Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence are missing. Those guys are the essence of it. These are pretty foundational pieces to start if you're going to have success. they're 22nd in the league in points scored per game, and we are going to move off the Cowboys after this, but we previewed it in your podcast. They're not winning this week against the Eagles, are they? And this is where we're going to get done on Sunday.
No, I can't see that happening. Now, again, it's the NFL, and I'm going to be a a cliche thrower right here. On any given Sunday, it's the National Football League, and don't be surprised if you're surprised. And but I can't see that happening, Mike. And Troy's exactly right. There's a lot of frustration amongst ex-Cowboys. Dennis Thurman, who played 9 years, was a Pro Bowl safety for the Cowboys, and went to a Super Bowl with Tom Landry and that crew. He's frustrated. Like, he watches the Cowboy games religiously on Sundays, and he's frustrated because he's proud to be a Cowboy. That star on that helmet meant something to him. And I think for a lot of Cowboy Nation, they share the Troy Aikman and Dennis Thurman's frustration with the state of the Cowboys right now.
Do you think, Jeff?
And just
a name I don't think I've mentioned his name all year now, but we know what to expect from Cooper Rush, as you say. If they do lose this weekend, if they lose a couple, could we see Trey Lance? Is it worth rolling him out and seeing what they have in Lance?
I agree with you 100%. Why you gave up a 4th round pick for this guy? He hasn't played a snap since he came to Dallas. He needs to get on the field, or just admit that you made a mistake and move on. But you can't know if a guy can play until he plays. That was one of the great things about NFL Europe. It provided an opportunity for guys like, Trey Lance, to resurrect their career, to do what Kurt Warner did, right? To do what John Kitna did, to go and play and learn how to play. And then also, like Achilles Smith, to go over there and to prove that you can't play, right? And that's one of the challenges that the NFL faces right now without a developmental league. Fellas, it's been a blast, but I got to run. So again, thank you so much.
See you, Jeff.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Bye-bye, Jeff. Best looking Saturday night. We really appreciate it, mate, and thank you for coming in as well. Thank you.
All right, guys. Appreciate you.
All the best. Bye-bye. I was going to keep him in there and wait for him to turn the phone off. I can see him laughing here now already, but I thought I'll let him go ahead. Appreciate Jeff. Jeff's been an incredible support, continues to be an incredible support. We're hoping to get him over here if it works. And Jason, I gave you the Friday of your life bringing him in there, didn't I? Definitely.
That was pretty cool. I've watched a lot of your shows with Jeff. That's the first crossover these podcasts have had. So yeah, haven't seen him since Super Bowl week. Glad to see he's getting on well with Hawaii this year.
Yeah, they have a big game on Saturday night, and let's just be honest, because we're coming to an Irish podcast here. If Jeff wins out, he's got a bowl game, so he can't come over here for TV or whatever. It's not on me; it's on him for TV and stuff. But if he doesn't, we'll hopefully try and get him over to a few events in Ireland, and we will see the crack. Before we look at each team in detail, Jason, as we move on to the second topic of the night, the NFL returns to Germany this weekend, returns to Munich for the first time since 2022 after that legendary moment with Tom Brady for a start, and then also coming to Munich now, and it's a bit of a different situation in terms of the teams in the games. Whenever the Seahawks came in 2022, they were, I think, top of the NFC West with Geno Smith, really impressing. Now, at the time that game was announced, it wasn't expected that was going to be the case, but they really impressed that season coming into it. And then Tom Brady. It wouldn't have mattered if Tom Brady went into Munich 0-10. Tom Brady came to Munich, and I have to say, and I'll say it every year, it was the best atmosphere I've ever been at. It's the best weekend I've had. Obviously, I've had some great weekends with you lads as well, don't get me wrong. Frankfurt with the Chiefs and Dolphins was not that far off last weekend as well. Is there any party is like, oh, I really want to go? And what's your just sort of thoughts around the fact that the NFL is exploding in Germany and in Europe as well?
Oh, there's a big part of me that would like to go. Financial reasons and work commitments and otherwise have prevented that from happening, but I definitely want to get to Munich at some stage. And I think it's great to see that Germany has become, a second London, a second home for the NFL in Europe, because the fans are clearly passionate. We could see it for the decade before the German game. Every time you went to London, you were bound to encounter a few German fans who are some of the most knowledgeable fans you'll ever talk to when it comes to the NFL. So fantastic. Yeah, I'm looking forward to eventually getting over there. Next time it's in Munich. As I say, we'll talk about the game now in a second. It's It's a few interesting storylines for sure. It's certainly not the quality game you want, but I'm not taking any game for granted. We've got regular games happening this side of the pond every year now, and it's not even. I mentioned it after the London games. It's not like it's become a huge deal now where everyone's focusing on, well, we have an international game, let's play into it and use all the stereotypes and coverage and in the coverage of the game and all that. It just feels normal now at this stage. It's just part of the schedule for the NFL. A lot of the players will have been over previously already, so it's part of their schedule. They know what to expect. It's part of the routine now, and I think that's cool. It just sums up how far the game has come over here.
I think your last point before we look at this game is so important. It is something that players and teams are now more used to, and I know the general whatever, don't talk about the situation is that it used to be a situation where teams went and then that was them for a long time. We now see teams with marketing that are coming over every other year. The Jets, the Vikings in London, for example. And you would honestly, I don't know offhand, but if you look at the history of the Germany games and the teams that came over, they've now hit their quota. So for the marketing teams that are in that market, the vast majority of them have now played. I do believe, to be fair, the Falcons have not, but I wouldn't be surprised next year if you see the Chiefs coming over again to Germany. I think it's too big of a market, and from what we've seen ourselves, Jason, last year in Frankfurt, it was just a takeover that weekend. But I will say this, I feel that I'll not be down on the city. I will not be down on the city, but I'll say this. We know what Frankfurt was like last year. It was a bit of a different vibe. It was outside the city, Jason. I think they'll go to Berlin. I think they'll go to the Olympic Stadium in Berlin. I think that's what will happen. If not next year, I think it'll be the year after. Or the year after, because Munich has to have it in 2 years again. But I think Berlin is a natural step. It's the capital city of Germany. Have you been to Berlin? Because it's mad, man. It's actually unreal.
No, I haven't. Last year was actually my first time in Germany, going to Frankfurt. So yeah, the more cities I see, the better. I think it's known as a bit of a rave, a bit of a party town. Were you out raving, Mick, or what kind of vibe did you have there?
Fun fact: whenever I was in Berlin, went over with my wife Lynn to Berlin just after COVID, about a year after COVID. I'd never got COVID. I landed in Berlin, had COVID, couldn't go to Coldplay. Now, look, I wouldn't say I would have went, but I was floored. I couldn't get out of bed. I was wrecked. So I went to Berlin. I ended up I had a couple of drinks the day after and stuff, but we had originally that morning before I got sick, the day before, went out to the Olympic Stadium, Jason, and I'm telling you now, it's outside the city, but the walk up is just, it's something else. It is unreal. So I'd like to see it. I think if you have any of the sort of teams, it would be unreal, so let's see what happens. Obviously, we are going to go to a situation now where we're going to look at the teams. Do you want to go first? I think you're going to go with the Panthers, yeah? The Panthers are in a really...
Yeah.
Am I correct firstly on the Panthers, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
I mean, it's a really weird one, Jason, because this Panthers team last week, before they played, nobody would have given them a chance, right? At all. Right? So...
Yeah, it was don't get me wrong now, it's not like they lit it up or anything, but the performance last week was a lot better. I'll start by giving the other point of view of the trade that we just discussed for the Cowboys. Good move by the Panthers to get rid of Mingo and get some capital back, because their situation right now is, of course, they're in a rebuild, but they're almost rebuilding a rebuild at this stage, because they laid the foundations incorrectly last year with the first attempt, so they have to get some that draft cap and look towards the future. It's just the type of season that it's become for them naturally. And part of this rebuilding situation is checking what talent they have on the roster and what players they might want to keep there. Because Bryce Young was a name that was kind of warmly mentioned around the trade deadline as maybe the Panthers are done with him. Maybe they want to get what they can now before his value plummets too much. And that, of course, didn't happen. It was a solid performance from him last week. I think a big part of that was the offensive line. Pretty good at keeping Young upright. They've been pretty decent on the season as a whole, but just gave up one sack last week against the Saints. And when they played the Saints in the season opener, it wasn't the case at all. They gave up 4 sacks and the offensive line struggled quite mightily. So that was a big difference in allowing Bryce Young to of course, play better. I mean, if you look at the wide receiver depth chart, it's just kind of, you won't recognize many names there. I was just looking at it before we came on, and there wasn't even any second stringers listed on the depth chart. They have just 3 wide receivers as of right now, with Thielen going on IR, the Quentin Johnson trade, of course, a couple of weeks ago, and now Mingo gone again. And the receivers that are starting, they didn't help Young out too much last week. David Moore had a dropped clear touchdown. Xavier Legette there was an interception came because he wasn't strong enough at the catch point on one play. Again, perfect throw from Bryce Young. So he made some great throws. He had some time. There was no miracles. He just made some smart decisions with a few bad ones thrown in there as well. But overall, they were better. It helps that they were coming up against an outfit like the Saints. And I think the fact that Dennis Allen was swiftly let go after that game sums up the kind of situation that the Panthers are in, that they're the type of team, if you lose to, you're getting fired, because nobody should be losing to this team when you look at the roster and the state that they're in. Of course, on defense, very weak as well. One of the worst teams in the league, and they've been hurt by injuries as the weeks have rolled on, with a few players going to IR. So it's just a roster in a terrible situation. A team in a terrible situation in terms of a long-term outlook. It's going to be a while before they can reset, but they're making some smart moves short-term to do that, while trying to get some capital back.
It's funny because it's obviously great to have Jeff on, but one of the things that I wanted to have him on, I thought he was going to be here at about past. So one of the things I wanted to have him on, Jason, was to really talk about the situation with the Giants, because we done his podcast earlier on, and he seems convinced that if the Giants do not get the result that they expect this weekend, in terms of the fan base will, look, obviously a lot of the fans have turned on Daboll. All right, we know that. But he genuinely believes, and a lot of New York apparently seems to believe, that Daboll could be out if they don't win this game this week. I'll go past that, and I'm not being disrespectful to Giants fans, but I don't really see the difference between a 2-8 football team, potentially, if they lost this week. And I understand, like, to lose to the Panthers in the way that the Panthers have started the season would be very, very... It wouldn't be a good result to take. But I don't really see the benefit of doing it for 5 or 6 weeks. Let them see out the season. I don't really see what the benefit would be there. But that is apparently starting to talk about that. And at the end of the day, the Giants are 32nd in the league in scoring offense, averaging 15 points per game. It is the lowest in the NFL. They're 23rd in passing yards per game. And it's funny because any Giants fan I talk to, Jason, talks about not how Daniel Jones has been poor, but sort of why he's been inconsistent. That's the word they're using, is inconsistent. And okay, look, you can use inconsistent all you want. And I understand that. And there was glimpses, because I was sitting at 3 o'clock in the morning 2 weeks ago watching the Steelers Monday Night Football game against the Giants at Acrisure Stadium, in the house, sofa, duvet out, having a great night. And there was 2 or 3 passes from Daniel Jones, which were class. But he's not doing that all the time. You go out and look at some of these rookie quarterbacks, or look at a general Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes isn't even having the best season of his career by a long shot, but you can still count on him and you can still rely on him, and a serviceable quarterback should be one which is more consistent. Like, people will look at the fact that they rank 28th against the run. Now, if I am actually going to use a Giants player in my headache at the end here, Jason, but if I'm the Panthers going to Munich, I have hope for a start. I believe firmly that I can take this Giants team on. And why shouldn't you? Last week Jayden Daniels was really able to evade or get rid of the pass rush all afternoon against the Giants in that game, and I haven't even talked about Jude yet. He wasn't sacked in the whole game, which was a real stop-start game, both sides of the ball, and he completed 15 of 22 passes for 209 yards and still got 2 touchdowns. And yes, that was really good for him, but that's nowhere near where he needs to be in terms of where he's been in certain games this year. If that's an off day for him, that's incredible for Jayden Daniels, because he's had a phenomenal season so far. But when you hear guys like, is it Dexter Lawrence coming out and saying, Lawrence coming out and saying, we've got to be more precise, he said last week. I think the team and as individuals, we've got to understand the game a little more, understand the way that certain things are being called, and understand the importance of situations in the game. I feel like, Jason, at times in the game that the Giants do switch off a bit, but they're a bad football team. There is no way I can say that in any other way. And the last thing I will say, because I can see you starting to come in there, is a guy that was previously with the Giants, and he was a god 2.5 years ago, who's now in Michigan, Wink Martindale. He said during the week, quote, "I'm glad that I'm here. I love the players that we have. It's obviously a different game, but it's a lot better than being in some places that are 2-7. There you go. That's not good. And I'm starting to, and I genuinely think, Jason, I think the Panthers win on Sunday in Germany. I can't believe I'm saying that. That's insane. No?
It's interesting match, and that's why it's, it could turn into an entertaining affair because the teams are pretty evenly matched on paper in terms of how bad they are. Certain aspects of both teams might cancel each other out as well. The Giants didn't touch Jay Daniels last week, as you say, but they do have the most sacks in the league. They've been pretty good at getting out after the quarterback in general, although it's kind of a weird imbalance there where they only have the 18th quarterback pressure rate in the league. So they're getting a lot of sacks without actually getting that consistent pressure. So that's kind of feeds into what you're saying there about the lack of consistency and maybe certain players taking downs off and not just consistently getting at the quarterback. It's more sporadic bursts. As I say, Panthers' offensive line has been decent at keeping the quarterback upright. So two of their, I'm going to call it strengths. It's more like the least weakness areas of these teams. They're kind of cancelling each other out there. So I think that's a key matchup to watch and see if that Giants pass rush can get pressure going on Bryce Young, because that obviously will be crucial. Another thing I'd be looking at this weekend is just the Giants run game. Daniel Jones is inconsistent as a passer, but one thing you can rely on him generally is getting a few yards on the ground, and they have a few running backs that can get the job done in that regard as well. So if the Giants can get the run game going and can get the pass rush going, I think that'll be the keys for them getting a win this weekend. If I had to predict a result right now, I would go with the Giants. It's probably a situation here where you were researching the Giants and I was researching the Panthers, so each of us believe our team is worse than the other, and so we're going for the opposite team. But I think I'll pick the Giants. I just back them, back their pass rush to get things done this weekend.
I have a feeling whenever we both see each other again in New Orleans, we'll not be talking about these two teams that week going for that game. Let's just put it that way. Mark is in New Orleans at the minute as well. You can catch up with him on social media. This week, he's actually about to chat to Charlie Smith. And it's funny because we have a camera, but it's plug only, like a live battery, and they're on a pitch. And that was the last text he sent me, so I hope he sorts it out. Oh my God. Say a prayer.
Thanks, he's good. He's good on the spot. He's a good innovator, so he'll come up with something.
I hope we brought Taylor for Charlie. We'll see you on the second part of this podcast presented by Elite Sport, the official betting partner of the NFL in Ireland and the UK. Thank you for sticking along with us, NFL Ireland on Instagram. We'll see you on the other side. Coming on to week 10 of the NFL season, Pro Football Ireland's NFL podcast. We are so excited to be here. Week 10 of the season, the biggest game of the season, that Germany game this week. So excited. I'm trying to make Jason Hayes laugh. He's not laughing yet. It's a really exciting game this week in Germany, and I'm gutted he's not there. But we're here for week 10 of the season. 888 Sport, the official betting partner of the NFL in Ireland and in the UK as well. And Jason, one of the things that we wanted to look at this week on this segment was there's a lot of there's a lot of wins. What's wrong with me tonight? There's a lot of 2-win football teams, Jason. I'll say that again just for better effect. There's a lot of 2-win football teams, Jason. And it's really being talked about a lot in the media, and that's why I wanted to talk about it on this podcast tonight. But then I actually went, I actually went and asked like an NFL research doctor machine, shall we say, how many teams last year were 2 wins only through the first 9 weeks of the season? The Panthers The Titans, the Jets, the Patriots, the Jags, the Browns, the Raiders, the Giants, and the Saints. We are not that far off where we were last year. Do you know what I mean?
I was about to pair this whole we're in a catastrophe and the quality of the league's gone down, and now we've just that's kind of
Well, no,
blown out what we're doing.
I do, and look, no, I'm being serious. Feel free to give me your thoughts as well, because I do think there's been a shift, and I know that we have had teams last year that have struggled, but I think this year we're going to see a lot more teams with 1, 2, 3, 4 maximum wins come the end of this season. So, what's your thoughts?
I suppose broadly speaking, it's not like one brush paints all. Is that a phrase? Did I just make up that phrase? Whatever I'm trying to say. The situations are all very different in terms of why some of these teams are at 2 wins. We just talked about the Giants and Panthers, who are 2 of them. You've also got the Saints, Browns, Raiders, Patriots, and Dolphins. So you find teams are finding themselves in these situations for a variety of reasons. Miami look decent. They're definitely not at the level they were last year, but when Tua is back there, they had a good game against the Bills at the weekend, and they weren't bad against the who did they lose to the week before again? Oh, I Cardinals, yeah.
Yeah.
So they look pretty. Yeah. I'm well aware. They certainly shouldn't be in panic mode. I know the season doesn't look good right now, and the playoff prospects are looking slim, but they're in a league of their own in terms of comparing to these other teams. Patriots are in a rebuild. You'd expect them to be struggling at this point. Has been a few strong opinions on Jared Mayo so far from the Patriots fan base, but you got to give them time with what they're doing, especially when you're seeing promising things from their quarterback. Carolina, they're rebuilding. As I say, they're rebuilding a rebuild. Browns and Giants, I think, are 2 teams that stand out to me as being particularly underwhelming. From that bunch, you would have expected the Browns to be more competitive, at least on defense this year. So it has been a pretty catastrophic year for them. And the Saints, of course, have made the ultimate move of firing their head coach. Kind of going to put you on the spot here, Michael. But Dennis Allen is gone. So I might ask you the question: if we run through the rest of these head coaches, whose seat do you think is the hottest from these 2 win teams right now?
What a question.
We've got Mike McDaniel, Jared Mayo, Antonio Pierce, Kevin Stefanski, Brian Daboll, and Dave Canales with the Panthers. Any names jumping out to you there as under threat?
It's so hard on a couple of them. First off, I'm more surprised that you're calling them Brian Daboll. Is it Daboll or Dable? I've been calling him Dable for years.
Did I say Daboll? Yeah. Dable? I don't know.
Doesn't matter at this point. It's not going to change anything in the field. Let's put it that way. I feel like, first off, and this is actually, I like that you asked me this, because you've actually sort of rolled through those teams, and I might give my reason for why I think there's so little wins for some of them in a second, just generally. But I think it's better for me to go through it in this way. I'm a firm believer in time. Like, I'm a Manchester United fan. I know it takes time. I've seen over the last 10 to 12 years that, people need time, and maybe some people are given too much time, and then some people aren't given enough time. It's no different in the NFL. Why, I just feel like Canales deserves a bit more time. I'm not saying he deserves another full season, but why would you get rid of him now? It just doesn't. It wouldn't make sense. In the same way, rolling in Mike McDaniel just wouldn't make sense either. We know the project, and we know he's been there for a considerable amount of time now. He's respected by his peers down there. He's respected by his players. The issue that the Dolphins have, and nobody wants to talk about it, is, well, to a certain extent, is the quarterback situation with Tua. Is he the long-term option? Because if he goes down again, that's the issue, and maybe there's too much of an emotional attachment there from McDaniel, which could eventually catch up on his job. Weeks before the Patriots came into the season, weeks before the Patriots came into London to play in Wembley against the Jaguars, a game that we were both at, Jason, there was talk of unrest in the locker room that seems to have maybe gone off a little bit, but it's that sort of mid-season slump where you don't start to hear some of these things. I think for me it has to be Daboll. I think that's the guy where I would look at and think, but for the reasons that we've talked about in the previous section of this podcast in terms of the game in Germany, a lot of rumours going around, obviously, what could happen in this weekend. But for me, I really think the Raiders and Antonio Pierce. Now, if you cast your mind back to the end of last season and the love that they had for him and the respect they had for him, and Jeff won't talk about this publicly a lot, Jason, but he knows two guys very high up in the organization. And I guess I can say it now. So Jeff rang me about just over a year ago. And he said I don't know why he was in the Raiders facility. It might have been last summer. It was at a really weird time. And he said, you'll never believe who I ran into in the Raiders facility. I was walking down the corridor. Tom Brady walks past. And I'm like, the hell is Tom Brady doing? And we obviously know now what he was doing in the Raiders facility. I was like, oh my God. So he has ins and outs, and he was very high up on Antonio Pierce at the start of the season, but we have not seen that transition from year one or year 0.5 in his point to year one or year two. And the history of the Raiders, the history of the decisions by Davis would make you feel that something will happen there, that he will lose his job. And just to sort of just evaluate the general discussion point that we're having, we do have a live comment from Gary who's watching saying that he believes that the quality of coaching is going down year on year. Too many of the coaches listen to the analytics instead of talking points. And I believe that's really key as well. I think in a modern society, in the modern world, maybe sometimes we do, like, and not even just coaches, a lot of us rely too much on data and too much on certain points. Like, if we make a podcast and 15 people listen to it, but we had the crack and we enjoyed it and it was insightful, surely that matters more than, like, maybe not 15, more than 15 people. Surely that matters more. Do you know what I mean? Gary also said, some of the coaches too interested in being personalities and looking hip. He believes that McDaniel is the perfect example and bring back Sleeveless Bill. Have you anything to add to this topic, my man?
I agree. I think McDaniel has taken those golden sunglasses and stuff. It's a bit too fair when you're 2-6. You can get away with that stuff when you're having the season they were last year, but I think even with the Dolphins fan base, some of them aren't too happy at some of the things he's doing right now. Agree with Antonio Pierce. The two hires I probably wasn't the biggest fan of. Recent hires was Antonio Pierce and Jared Mayo, simply for the reason that internal hires don't tend to work in the NFL. When you're trying to change an organization, the typical move that's brought success before is to pivot and go a completely different direction. So bring guys from the inside out hasn't worked historically, and that's pretty much the reason why I didn't like them. And you have to give Jared Mayo more time because he has only had half a season in charge. He may well turn things around, but I'd agree that Antonio Pierce, having had the latter half of last season, is probably in trouble right now. And the fact that he's at the stage where he's firing some of his coaching staff, again, that kind of spells a bit of panic within the organization.
A wee bit concerning.
And I'm sure there's coaches on his staff right now that might be a bit on edge, mightn't be too happy with some of those moves, because when a head coach does that, what that is trying to portray is the fact that they're saying it's not my fault, pretty much. It's almost a lack of accountability and pointing the finger, saying that's why we're losing, I should fire my offensive line coach. I think it has to stop with the head coach, and he just isn't getting it done right now. Just quickly, Kevin Stefanski, I mentioned that the Browns are one of the teams I've been most disappointed in this year. They willingly went with Deshaun Watson for the first few weeks, and the product he was putting out in the field was abysmal. And I think that's a guy where patience might wear thin pretty fast with him as well, which is kind of bizarre, and it sums up the NFL because only a couple of weeks ago, the last couple of years, he would have been held in high enough regard based on the success they were having. But the defense has taken a step back, and the offense has taken absolutely no steps forward. They've gone backwards, if anything, from an already poor position. And it doesn't help when you see the likes of Baker Mayfield having an MVP type season over in Tampa Bay as well. those are the type of things that won't help a head coach.
We have went, and I actually think this discussion has been one of the best one we've had this season, but we have went through about 12 minutes there, and we have not said Doug Peterson. We have not mentioned Peterson whatsoever. That's mad, isn't it? Like, I mean,
Are they 2-win? I missed them.
Huh? Yeah, they are. I think your
They're a
wife had
2-win
me with
team.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They are. They're a 2-win team. We'll talk about the Jags at a different point, but I think he would certainly be one to go. I think at the minute Shad Khan couldn't wait any longer, so we will see. We do want to roll in some time here for a couple of really big topics. One is the headache, which we have all week. If you do have any questions, fire them in. I know I've called a couple of them out there already, but one of the biggest games probably of the season, Jason. Like, I am time stamping this podcast already, but I'm a happy man staying up in Thursday Night Football this week. It's a big game, Bengals Ravens, and we've another big game on Sunday night between the Texans and the Lions. Really intriguing prospect between a 6-3 Texans team and a 7-2 Lions team. A Lions team that I'm starting to sort of expect just to be in New Orleans when we're there for the Super Bowl. If I'm being honest with you, I think they're that good. What's your thoughts ahead of this game, and which team would you like to talk about?
I'll talk about the Houston Texans. You know, they're 6-3 right now, and it's kind of slipping away from them right now. I don't think their record was probably an accurate reflection of the quality of football they were playing over the first 7-8 weeks of the season. You know, they were winning a lot of close games, but they certainly hadn't taken the step forward that a lot of the media would have predicted in the off season. I think key to their struggles has been the offensive line. It's in a very poor situation right now, and that was summarized in the last game against the Jets when CJ Stroud was sacked 8 times. The run game has been pretty good. You know, Joe Mixon has been a very nice addition to the Houston Texans offense, but it really is that pass protection that's been the struggle. Of course, it hasn't helped that they've been down their top 2 receivers. Recently lost Diggs for the year. Potentially getting Nico Collins back this weekend. Nothing confirmed at the point of this podcast, so I hope I haven't dated it by saying that. But obviously that would be a huge addition. If Dave Tankdell and Nico Collins on the outside and a good tight end in Dalton Schultz in the middle, you know, that's more weapons than you can ask for. And certainly that isn't an area I'd be overly concerned with for the Texans. My concern on offense right now is primarily on the offensive line because it is the biggest glaring weak point. The defense is good. Azeez Al-Shaair, middle linebacker, he's coming back first time since I think it was week 3 or 4. He's been out since. So he's a leader, he's a team captain, and that should help on defense. But overall, they have a good pass rush. Will Anderson has proved to be a great draft pick, 7.5 sacks. He leads the team. The Texans overall are second in the league in terms of putting pressure on the opposing quarter. And their secondary as well is playing pretty good football. Opposing quarterbacks have the lowest completion percentage in the NFL against them. So a very solid defense, you know, not elite, kind of hovering around that 10 to 15 range in the league. But the concern right now for the Texans, and it's not an area that teams can fix in the middle of a season, it is that offensive line. They've got Tunsil in left tackle, great player. But across the board, there's been struggles, particularly at left guard. I know some of the Texans fans aren't happy with the left guard performance in recent weeks. So that's certainly an area they need to address, particularly coming up against a team like the Lions with such a ferocious defense that they have. What are your thoughts on the Lions, Mick?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'll just probably bounce in and start explaining it because I think there's like a 6 or 7 difference on our Wi-Fi, so it's good crack. If you want to hold your hand up when I say this just to see what the difference is live right now, it's good crack. There's definitely a 4-second difference. There we go. So I'm just going to land into mine and then we'll go to our headache after, so we get off the stream in a good way. I really agree with what you're saying on the Texans, and I think first off, the Texans have been very, very impressive to watch, even when they've had little to work with in certain situations. And when you talk about Nico Collins, and I don't think you're time dating this podcast or time stamping this podcast, we know he's limited. He will be back soon. It might be this week, it might not be this week. We'll see what happens. But I had a stat here. I'm trying to find it on Nico Collins in terms of how important he is. I believe it might genuinely be on my RTE article, and I'm not trying to advertise the RTE article that I have this week. But on the RTE article, I said that Nico Collins was so important. Weeks 1 to 5, without Collins in the lineup, the expected points added, their EPA, was 12th. So with him in week 1 to 5 with Nico Collins in the Texans lineup, the Texans passing game was ranked 12th in expected points added, EPA per play, but it dropped to 24th between weeks 5 to 9. It shows the importance that he is to this team, and certainly they'll expect to see him back as soon as possible, and I think that's really, really important for them. The Lions one is interesting. They come in 7-1 on the season so far. They've had that bye week, I believe, and we all know the major challenge that the Lions have had over the last few weeks. The Lions' issue has been the fact that they have lost their star player in Aidan Hutchinson, and that, for any team, that is such a hard thing to deal with, to accept, and the way that they have done that, and the way that Dan Campbell has been able to do that, in my opinion, is just unreal. But generally, for me, Jason, the Lions look like a team that is just complete. They look ready to rock and roll. But the way that Jared Goff has played, I believe, over the last 4 to 5 weeks, and the way that this offensive coordinator and Ben Johnson has allowed him to play, I think is so good. You look at the way that he played against the Packers. 145 yards, 18 to 22 in absolutely atrocious weather last weekend. The fact that he had command, he knew exactly what he was doing. He was in his moment. He is genuinely probably at the highest level he has been at. In the last 6 weeks, he has an 83% completion percentage. And for me, that's MVP type caliber there, straight up. They have a 91-point differential in the first half of games. They get out, they put the foot down, and they get guys going. We know how good Amon-Ra has been over the last few weeks, but the fact of the matter is, Jason, they have a hell of a run game as well. One of the things that really impressed me last week was the combination between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, who had 138 combined yards, the fact that they could run over the Packers team. And I really believe on Sunday Night Football against the Texans, yes, Goff will be crucial at the start of this game and in the first half of the game in terms of what he can do and get the ball down the field, because he's going up against a quarterback in CJ Stroud that is so mobile as well. But I feel like the X factor here is going to be Montgomery, and it's going to be Gibbs as well. So let's see what happens. They're just so fun to watch, man. When you got guys like Kirby Joseph, Sam Laporta, guys that we maybe don't talk too much on the podcast about as well, they are just unreal. Like, to see them, granted against the Titans where they just destroyed them. I think they had 4 turnovers, 51, 52 points. They're a fun team to watch. And this is the biggest point, and this is the point that I will end it on, because I believe it's really, really important. We've seen the Lions go to Lambeau Field and win in the way that they did in such a big divisional game. We've seen the Lions put the foot down in certain games. We've seen the Lions go to San Francisco in a repeat of the NFC Championship last year. We are now going to see the Lions go to Houston this weekend and take on a young quarterback, but a really proficient offense in this Houston Texans team. A quite centrally complete team on both sides of the ball. Really, really good team. If the Lions go in and impress, I can't see any other team that goes near them. And in the joys of our internet issues, or the little pauses that we have, Jason, feel free to go into your headache so we wrap this up in a perfect way.
Yeah, just quickly on the game itself. A lot easier said than done, but if the Texans are going to have any chance of winning, I think the time of possession is going to be crucial. Things have just been, Goff is making things look so easy right now. It's insane. As you mentioned, the completion percentages there, but it's just so easy. And the run game has been a big part of that. Some strong use of play action and a lot of quote unquote easy throws for Jared Goff to be making. Ben Johnson is going to have his pick of any job he wants in the off season. I was just watching a clip before we came on, Adam Schefter talking about it. There'll be a list of teams that want to interview him. He'll pick the one team he wants to take over, and that'll be that. He'll be interviewing them. They won't be interviewing him. He'll have whatever choice of team he wants, because what that offense is doing right now is just unnatural. It's so efficient, and it's very fun to watch. Za'Darius Smith pass rush they traded for, Lions traded for during the week. He's not going to play, so semi-good news for the Houston O-line there. If Houston are going to win this game, they've got to get Joe Mixon going. They've got to bleed the clock, try and keep the Lions offense off the field for as long as they can. And of course, the defense has to have the game of their lives to have any chance of stopping Jared Goff. Moving on to the headaches, finish up the podcast. We kind of touched on two of these guys already, but I've actually got two headaches for you this week. As we all know, Dak Prescott is going on IR, so Cooper Rush is coming in for the Cowboys offense. Trevor Lawrence as well. It's looking like he's going to miss the game at the weekend. So Mac Jones will be starting for the Jaguars in all likelihood. So the two headaches for me are for Mike McCarthy and Doug Peterson, because they both have their backup quarterbacks. The teams are struggling already. And if those teams have embarrassing losses, which they very well might, because the Cowboys are playing the Eagles and the Jaguars are playing a very strong Vikings defense with Mac Jones at quarterback, there could be a blowout loss on the cards for one of these teams here. And when the head coaches have their jobs on the line as it is, it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. One of these guys could be getting the boot on Monday. So two guys with headaches this week. They're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their jobs right now, and they don't have the tools to do it at the quarterback position.
It's really interesting, man. Hold your hand up so I know how bad the stream is currently. It's not too bad. It's all right. It's fine. It's got better. There was like a moment at the start of the Sunday Night Football where you were like 10 seconds. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go straight into it. I've been told live that Mark got a plug. So that's all I know. He's sorted. So there is a God. And his name is called Charlie. It's funny because I was sort of saying...
Pope has been... I'm going to interrupt you with the Wi-Fi lag here, but the Pope has been tweeting about the Saints a lot, so maybe there was divine intervention there in getting that plug to the Saints facility.
I've been looking to feature that all week, but then I'm also aware that not everybody on the island of Ireland is a Roman Catholic as well, so I'm trying to tread lightly. But I'm sorry, those tweets are 10 out of 10. They're actually quite fun. So if anyone's not aware about this, they're taking the Pope's tweets, is it Pontifex on X? And they're saying, thank you, Pope Francis, and all this sort of stuff. They need more than the prayer these days from the Pope, I'd say. Even the Pope can't sort it out. Just on my head, just before we round up, and thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. There's over 3,000 people watching this on Twitter. Really, really cool. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks to Jeff. I think we'll get Jeff starting to come in these later weeks to pop in, I think, on these live shows. I was saying about how I think the Giants are going to lose on Sunday against the Panthers, yeah. Who do you think I put in for my headache? Tyrone Tracy Jr., running back for the Giants. We all know that Devin Singletary's return from injury would maybe take Tracy out of it. It hasn't happened. The Panthers have allowed an absolute brick ton of rushing yards to any team they've faced this season so far. And we know, don't get me wrong, we know how bad the Giants have been as well. But I can see a situation on Sunday, regardless of who wins the game, where guys like Tracy Jr. get a chance, get a few runs together and get that ball down the field. Run. What's run in German? We'll see the crack. And when people start singing Country Roads come fourth quarter on Sunday, maybe we'll have one or two touchdowns. Is that the one thing you're missing is Country Roads? Is that the one? Yeah.
I've heard the Frankfurt rendition last year, but that Munich rendition with Tom Brady and the Seahawks, that was something else. That'll be a tough one to match.
Let's be honest, right? It's not going to be the same, is it? It's not going to match. Can we all agree on that now? It's not going to be the same. Nothing ever compares to Brady. I'll never. This tomorrow, or for people on the podcast today, 2 years ago, when he walked into the facility at the Bayern Munich training place, I'll never forget it. That's how special it was. It was just unreal. The 2-year anniversary of that is on Monday. I've literally got it on my phone. Going to tweet it Monday. 2 years ago, I spoke to Tom Brady. It's actually mad. Like, but it's not even about me talking to him. It's just about. It's just a fun week. It's changed now because, like, even like Good Morning Football was there all week, and it has got different. I understand it has to when the game gets bigger and there's more games overseas and stuff. But I guess finally we'll just end it in this. I don't think we're far off. Just from my viewpoint, I don't think we're far off seeing another game announced somewhere. I'm not saying Dublin, just on generally. I think they'll announce something quite soon because we're getting to the end of November. Just finally, Jason, before we go out of here, I have not give you your opportunity. Another lad from the north making it in the NFL. What's the thoughts on that? Will we ever see a Cork man make it in the NFL in this current generation? By the way, I think Mangan will. I'm just talking. Will we see like a Cork guy come to the academy and stuff? Will we see someone from the south get in as well? Andy Quinn, I think, is a few years off, but I think he'll get in. A couple of lads from the north really doing well, but pretty cool to see Jude make history last week, wasn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, it's quite surreal. Let's not kid ourselves. We were all holding our breath there for a second. We had a mini heart attack on that extra point that just crept in the left upright, but he got the job done, and he went 100% on his kicks for the day. So, great first step for Jude. He's been waiting for his opportunity. All it took was 2 kicker injuries. So, again, some divine intervention there to get him on the field, and he proved his worth. And that's what it's all about. Just like any other career, you got to go improve it. You got to get some experience, and then you're going to become a more valuable asset for the Giants or whatever other team is out there. So great start for Jude, and yeah, a GA player kicking a field goal in a real live NFL game. It's just surreal stuff altogether, and it's the first step of many. And they'll probably look back on this moment in decades time as the first monumental step for hopefully a lot of guys who follow, and hopefully there's a Cork man in there, as you say. I know Liam Dineen.
You've got Liam Dineen, and obviously Mangan's there as well. And look, just to publicly wish him the best in his recovery from his hip surgery. I know it's not easy as well. So I've really enjoyed the podcast on the Monday with him and Jacob. Hope those guys get out. Will hopefully, please God, try and get them out to New Orleans. But you're right about Liam. Liam's got a good boot in him. And I guess I'll just sort of finally say as well, as of Thursday night, Gano is limited in practice, but has apparently been kicking well, according to Brian Dable. I think we can read between the lines there. But what I will say is I'm led to believe that there is really... I have to put this up. Emmett Donlan said the duo were working far better than the trio ever could. So that's a shout out to Mark Hogan there. But
did you ever sign Emmett? Did you ever sign Emmett's shirt in the end? He was asking for a selfie the last day, wasn't he?
Emmett's been to every Patriots game as media this side of the decade, which is hilarious. No, it's one of those things. But yeah, look, just on that, and it's something I haven't really had a chance to talk about. I've messaged Mark about it, and I was quite busy on Sunday. Just finally, for people listening, to go into a bar in South Derry in a village of 400 people on Sunday night, to walk into like a wee bar like Oil Boys and all. Like, there was hurling on. They turned the hurling off and put on the Giants game against the Commanders. Surreal. I honestly, I'm not getting emotional about it, but like, Jesus Christ, it's actually nuts. Like, there was lads like in having scoops, had drove from like Derry and all down just to come to Swatra, like to see what the crack was. But then I found out in the third quarter there's another bar called Pat's down the road, and you could hear people in Pat's cheering when he scored the field goal because they were behind on the stream. Mad. Mental. I don't think you'll see the like of that again for a long time, unless, and I'm sure it will happen when Charlie gets in and Mayo Bridge gets its chance as well, because it's even smaller than Swatra. So yeah, really, really special, and it shows you how much the game has come here. Just as I said at the start of that, we have obviously this podcast here. Jeff's podcast has dropped. There's a Week 11 college football podcast out, and Mark is talking to Charlie Smith right now, so that'll be out in the morning, probably 7 a.m. as a podcast, and the video will go up as well on social media. There's also a great podcast with Connor and Jacob chatting to Charlie. Check it out. Some of the answers are fantastic. And I am, please God, talking to Jude on Saturday morning. So if you have any questions or if you'd like me to ask Jude something, let me know. It's a bit mad, but you know what, Jason? It's good crack, lad. Looking forward to week 11. Have you any plans for the weekend? I'll just sit and eat the pretzel from Lidl. And is it Lidl or Lidl? Let's end it in that.
Little. Good
Oh,
night.
Jesus, no. It's Lidl, lad. Lidl. No.
Is that well? Germany should have the answer. What do they call it in Germany?
I'll go and find out
Let's
this
do some
weekend.
research this weekend.
I will go and find out this weekend, folks. Thank you so much for listening, for watching again. We really appreciate it. A couple of live events coming up. Phoebe's Super Bowl night is on the 27th of January. And there's a night that Friday in Dublin as well. Still some tickets for both events. linktr.ee/NFL Ireland. Do check the socials over the next week for news on Jeff coming back over here. We will chat to you soon. God bless. Night. Enjoy week 10.